Good evening. I'm going to begin this talk with a rather morbid question. What happens to us when we die? I don't mean do we get cremated or buried. I don't mean do we go to heaven or hell. I mean what happens to us, the us here on earth, when we die. Do people still talk about us? Do people still think about us? Do people still talk to us? How are we remembered and how are we mourned? This is how we used to be mourned. Imagine you die, an obituary gets placed in the newspaper, your family and friends are invited over to your living room, in the picture here, where there's an open casket where you're laid. People parade through your house, paying their respects to you and to your living family members. Back then, it could take days, weeks, sometimes even months or years for people to find out that you had died. Most conversation took place face-to-face, possibly by telephone. Today, mourning is much different. The World Wide Web has opened us up to a vast array of possibilities. We have instantaneous communication. You can talk to people about someone's death in just a matter of moments. You can send it out to hundreds, even thousands of people, if you have that many friends or followers, instantaneously. And so the way that we are expressing grief and mourning has changed because of this space. The image seen here, done by the Opti Project, is how interconnected all of the different web browsers, engines, websites are. Kind of looks like a planet, or possibly heaven. We don't know where things go in this space. We don't know if people have received our messages. Yet we know when we send an email, there is a presence on the other end. And that is much like how people are feeling when they're sending messages to their loved ones using social media. But why are we communicating online? It's because that's where our friends and our families are. It's because we're storytellers. We need narrative to help us make sense of things. And let's be honest, we also want to send pictures of cute cats and photos of our food. But we're no longer living in the same 5-mile radius as our friends and family. And so as we move away from our family, our communication has to branch out as well. 2 years ago, as I began this research, I had a very personal thing happen. I lost my 20-year-old cousin in an accident. And I didn't find out about her death by a phone call or someone texting me. I found out about it on Facebook. Within a matter of hours, there were hundreds of posts from friends and family saying goodbye to her on a wall. I got to see her last words, I get to see her final pictures, and they'll never change. That memorial will be there forever. Her family has offered to never take it down because so many people have felt close to her as if they never lost her and can still communicate with her because of her Facebook page. And so that led me into this study. And I'm currently working with Dr. Sarah McGee at Loyola University in Maryland and Alada Gramer-Kazeld here at LSU. She's a doctoral student. And we have been talking to people who have lost a loved one in the last 18 months. Some of them have lost children. Some of them have lost husbands, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers. But we've been interviewing them and asking them how they use social media to help with their grief and mourning. And I'm going to share some of the things that they have told us with you today. The first thing that they've shared with us is that they like to be able to control the information. They don't want someone beating them to the tweet. Okay, they want to be able to tell people personally, those close friends and family members, face-to-face or via telephone, and then they want social media to step in and do the rest of the work for them. They are emotionally and physically exhausted, and they just want to be able to post it on the wall and let everybody else just kind of comment as they want from there. Our interviewees have also said that they like the feeling of comfort that they get by being able to post things on Facebook or on Twitter. It's almost like they were giving people permission to talk about the death with them, permission to open up and grieve with them, permission to comment, to share stories, to share pictures, and that comfort came from behind a computer screen. They also like the idea of immortality, that their loved ones could continue on as social actors, that you could continue to post pictures, share memories, have conversations, that on birthdays, anniversaries, memorials, you could go and post and talk to that person. Share if you're missing someone in heaven. By a show of hands, how many of you have done this? Why do we do it? Do we feel as though that they can see what we post? Do we feel as though they can communicate with us? Do we feel as though they see what we type to them? Many of the people that we interviewed felt as though the people that they were sharing, posting, liking in heaven could see what they were doing, that they were very much real and present. We also saw that people wanted to be able to continue to memorialize. The posting on Facebook was not a one-time thing, where they were just sharing their mourning, sharing their grief, and then it was done. Think of it this way. You now have an unlimited eulogy. You're not restricted to a certain number of words. There are no restrictions for how much you can put on a tombstone online. There are no restrictions to a newspaper obituary online. You can continue to memorialize, you can continue to grieve as long as you need. There is also a very present sense of community online. People were making friends with strangers who were also sharing in their grief. People they had never contacted before, never heard of before, were sharing and talking about their loved ones. And so communal grieving, non-geographically bound grieving, takes place online. It used to be grieving was secluded. People often internalized their grief. You could mourn at the wake and at the funeral, but now with social media, we see pictures like this, we see memorials put up, we see people doing online funerals and having that communal grieving experience. And so we see a global widening of grief. We're also seeing inspiration. Many of the people that we interviewed talked about how pictures that are taken now are being put online and people saying, I thought you were there, I felt your presence, as though their loved one was inspiring people. And many of the people that we talked to said that they were never going to take those memorials to their loved one down. Anecdotally, we spoke to people who have had memorials up for a loved one for 5 or more years and are still posting to that person's wall. However, there were some negatives that came out in our interviews. One of them was that people were unsure as to whether or not social media were helping them quickly through the grieving process or whether it was prolonging their grieving process, saying that continued messages and pictures and comments may not actually be serving the purpose of helping them quickly to deal with their grief, to move past losing a loved one. As you can see from the comments posted here, there are some negatives that were experienced by people posting online. There were many things that they wanted to keep private, memories that they didn't feel were appropriate to be shared about their loved one. And so online mourning is not always positive. There is always that chance that someone is going to post or comment or share in a way that you don't feel is appropriate for grieving. And finally, another issue that we saw was a measure of enfranchisement, that there are some socially acceptable deaths that get grieved more online than others. For example, people who die from disease, terrorist attack, or accident are much more likely to be grieved for extended periods of time than those who die what we call unacceptable deaths. For example, suicide, drug overdose, or AIDS. I'm going to end this talk with the same question that I asked at the beginning. What happens to us when we die? Do people continue to talk about us? Do people continue to think about us? Do people continue to talk to us? What we are discovering is that we are very much ghosts in the machine of Web 2.0.